Rick Harsh, author and publisher. Corona Samizdat is my press. And I'm doing a series on a writer who publishes with Betimes Books of Dublin. That's the Ireland, Dublin, yes. The author's name is Craig McDonald. And I read the first book he published from them, which features a man named Hector Lassiter, who's 57 years old. And there's a series of Hector Lassiter books. And I actually don't know in what order they were written, but we want a younger guy now, huh? After that, old William Holden guy. Now we want the young William Holden guy, right? So I went back to the first one, found, for some reason I couldn't get a hold of it. In that one I think there's a story about how he and Ernest Hemingway came to be unfriendly. Because they were friends. I may be wrong about that. It may not be that book. But I didn't get it. So I got the next one, the second one in the temporal sense of the series. And it's called Forever's Just Pretend. And it's a title that when you first look at it, I don't know, there's something about pretend as a word in a title that doesn't catch you. Forever has, a hallmark sort of quality. And so it strikes you as a poor title until you finish reading the book, and then, and then it's a good title. It's the right title. So don't let the title throw you off. Anyway, when you're talking about a crime writer, and a noirish crime writer, the individual titles are not as important with more singular works, novels that are not connected to other novels and so on. So it's not a big deal, but I just noticed that and thought I'd mention it. But I want to start talking about McDonald by reading this from the introduction. If any label best describes the Hector Lassiter series, it's probably historical thrillers. I disagree, but I agree with why he says that. These books combine myth and history. The Lassiter novels spin around secret histories and unexplored or underexplored aspects of real events. Now, when myth and history, when you talk about myth and history, well, we're talking about the myth and history of events wherein a detective or writer of detective books, which is what Hector Lassiter is, who keeps getting involved in various things, and has a pretty mixed past. He was in Blackjack Pershing's Folly, chasing after Pancho Villa and Villa's territory. And he was in World War I, and he was in Paris afterwards, was friends with Hemingway. And I think I managed to get across in my first video about him that all of that seems a bit, well, I didn't use the word contrived, but you could think, oh, sounds contrived. But he's so good at it that it isn't. I mean, he just treats it very naturally. It's part of the atmosphere of his books, is that this character comes across as a real person, a real writer, and he's given him his history, and that history has to do with friendships and non-friendships and experiences that took him on a course where he met people like Orson Welles, who was in the first one to great effect. Touch of Evil was used, and it was brilliantly done. So this introduction was written by the author, Craig McDonald. And what's important to me about that is that I know that he's done his homework. And this book takes place in Key West, before Hemingway got there, I believe. And in 1924, 5, 6. And the Key West that you get there is during Prohibition. and so naturally there's plenty of drinking. And Prohibition is the best time to drink. Uh, I think everybody knows that. And certain things about the island and the way the island was, street names and all of that, you get an extremely good picture of Key West at that time, and I believe every word of it. I suppose if I wanted to check up on his history, I could find something to look up. But I think if I did, I would simply find out that he already, looked it up. I mean, I believe his stories. And for instance, part of the stuff going on here involves real estate buggery, and I'm sure that that's happened on Key West and more than once. There's another aspect to it that I think it's almost I don't know, it may be mentioned on the back of the book. Oh yeah, the Key West Clubber. I'll bet there was a Key West Clubber. But, maybe when he talks about myth and history, secret histories, unexplored or underexplored aspects of real events, maybe what that means is taking something that really happened and nobody knows the whole story behind it, and he invents his version of it. And I think that's nice. I mean, it's an added bonus to me when I can read a fun book, and noir is always fun if it's done well, and I can learn at the same time. So that's one of the enjoyable things about this. Key West is an interesting place. It's a fabled place. And, of course, you read it and you think, God, I wish I could have been there in 1907 or something, Would have been great, when there was still clean water and lots of great fish and, although the booze is better after Prohibition, probably. Anyway, but then you gotta read the book line by line, and, and sometimes something comes into your mind and you're not sure you like it. So here's something that I found, without looking to find anything, This thing may be the death of me, she said, stroking him there, then frowning at the sticky blood on her hand. Well, one of the great things about this book is you have lovers, and in a good noir, lovers don't generally come off too well. In the end or in the beginning, or one of them's usually betraying the other, or meets with a tragic accident or something like that. But what's great is in his case, the lovers are lovers, and so they fuck and they fuck and they fuck and they fuck. There's a lot of fucking in here. But what I object to, Craig, Mr. McDonald, if I may, is stroking him there. Why not stroking his penis, his cock? I mean, if they're going to do it, do it. I mean, there aren't many times where you have to say that. You can just say she was wet. You don't have to say she was wet in her vaginal zone, pussy, twat. You don't have to say that. But, stroking him there, that, I just wish you could just come right out and say it. Another thing I noticed was twice in the early going he used a comma of hair, and once a comma of hair is good. Twice, and you think, oh no, how many times is he going to use that? I want to like this book. Well, he never used it again, so it was fine with me. And that's the kind of thing that, you don't want to, if you've already been won over by an author, you don't want him to ruin it with tics or repetitions, and and he doesn't have that problem. But this is noir, and so you've got to have dialogue. Can this guy write dialogue? Can he write a Chandler dialogue? Well, actually, when you read Chandler, there are almost always unbelievably good scenes of dialogue, but not all through the book. That's a lot of it is just serviceable dialogue. It has to be believable coming out of that person's mouth. And McDonald is very good at presenting the whole character. And in that way, he's a very good writer because he's not just clipping along and making the plot work. He's making the characters who they are and say what they say. And thoughts that you have that naturally come up, he usually, takes care of them. So anyway, here's some dialogue. I don't think I need to tell you much about it, if anything. Hector edged closer to the door, reading the cop's name tag. So you're the storied Sheriff Mel Hoyt, the cop scowled. What of it? Hector said, nothing of it. The sheriff pressed. You've heard of me? Plenty, Hector said. What's that mean? Hector shook out a cigarette. He fiddled with a box of matches, struck one. Like I said, not much. What's that fucking mean? Brinke, the lover of Hector, looked tense, warning Hector with her eyes to back down. Hector rolled his eyes. Nothing. It means nothing. Don't you fucking adopt some attitude with me, Hoyt said. Don't you do that. You're the one with the attitude, Constable, Hector said. No identification, even when asked for it twice. I'm the one who was napping peacefully until you banged on the door and began running your belligerent mouth. All that coarse language in front of a lady. Tell me, who over your head can I complain to about your sour demeanor? You seem to have forgotten you're a public servant. The sheriff sighed and looked over his shoulder at his flunky with the missing finger. Fuck this, these two are a goddamn waste of time. I stopped there because I had to say this. In noir, you've got to have things like flunky with the missing finger. You've got to have interesting characters with interesting characteristics. And in 2 books so far, McDonald has done really, really great with that. Now, as to what happens in the book, well, you've got Hector's uncle, who's a con man who comes to the island and provides an extra great character. And you've got a lot of other people doing bad things. And sometimes, things are going to be predictable because, you're going like this. Oh, no. Oh, fuck. She's going to get killed, isn't she? Son of a bitch. Which is not bad. That doesn't spoil a book. I mean, it would spoil it for you if I told you that this character comes up, she'll be killed, this is where, this is how, this is by whom. I won't do that. But I'll say that in a positive way, you're caught along with the book. So, I got almost nothing but great things to say about this. And I'm anxious to read his next one, which I already have, Toros and Torsos. And I think this is, if I understood the editor right, Svetlana Peronko of The Times Books, this is the sequel to the one before. But I read it, and it was just fine. If it's a sequel, what do I care? But I may have misunderstood. Maybe the next one's a sequel to another one. I don't know. She recommended that I read Toros and Torsos first. But I wanted to go in the temporal order, so I'm reading that next. And I am reading it. And so now I'll tell you the worst thing about these books. This is 300 pages. That's a good chunk of book. But you can't stop. And so, in a very busy couple of days, I finished it. And, maybe in a year I can go back and reread them because of my age and dementia. And, but I got nothing but the highest recommendation. If you like crime writing, but you want good crime writing, well, this is great stuff. This is really great stuff. This guy is great. I'm completely won over. The writing is, I think, as good as it gets from what I've seen of modern, more or less straightforward noir crime writing, this is as good as you're going to get. You have, as I mentioned before, Elroy, who writes differently. But I think maybe Elroy has two novels that are up to the quality of this guy. No, one novel and one memoir. His memoir about his dead mother is just, you know, that's something you can only write if your mother has been murdered, you know, and I think that is the case with Elroy, and that book is just dark, stunning. And maybe White Jazz and LA Confidential are good enough, but I'm not sure they are, because, you know, this guy, what could be his Achilles heel, being stuck with historical stuff, actually works to his favor. It elevates his books because his writing rises up to the challenge of that. And so yet another Craig McDonald is read and given the highest praise, and the highest recommendation I can give to a crime novel. Oh, I meant to also mention David Peace again. You don't compare David Peace and this guy. I do recommend David Peace highly. And you don't read David Peace in 2 days. At least not his Midlands quartet. 1974 was the first one, I think. Red Riding, 1974. That stuff, he does some unusual stuff in there that might not be for everyone, but I think is fantastic. But I don't think there's any need to compare them. The question that might come up is it literature? Who cares? It's good enough for a guy who can't stand mediocre writing and wants to read good crime fiction now and then, like me, to love it. So, is it literature? I don't know, maybe. It's definitely in the top tier of noir and crime fiction. So, call it what you want, but buy it, read it. This guy is really, really, unfortunately, less known than he should be, I think. But if you have heard of him, why haven't you read him? If you have read him, why haven't you told me? So, Craig McDonald. I'm going to read Toros and Torsos next. Thanks.